9:31, and we start on time. But I guess what we can do in the interim is we can welcome the governor-elect. Norman, thank you. I can speak on behalf of the House, and I'll let the Senate speak on their behalf, but we're looking forward to working with you over the next 4 years. Thank you for your openness and your comments in the paper. I know that we've already had some meetings that have occurred and looking forward to having more meetings, but I want to thank you, looking forward to working with you. We have our Attorney General, Karen. And then a new kid on the block, we have Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. Welcome. Okay, here we come. So that was, I guess we filled enough time. If I can have everyone rise to receive the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Boy, am I going to miss everybody.
Governor, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Jones, Chairman Norman, Chairman Hanger, Chairman Ware, members of the General Assembly, good morning. What an honor it is to be with you today. I'm joined here today by my wife of 29 years, the First Lady of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Dorothy McAuliffe. I want to thank all the members of my cabinet and staff who are here with us today. Also joining us today, the Governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Ralph Northam, is in the house with us. The Lieutenant Governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Justin Fairfax, in the house with us, buddy. And the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mark Herring, is here with us. I thank all of them for their tremendous service to this great Commonwealth. As you know, this is the last budget that I will present to you. To be honest, I feel some sadness that our time together is coming to an end, but I do take heart knowing that all of you are even sadder to see me go. Yet I know you will be in very capable hands, the governor-elect and our new Secretary of Finance, Aubrey Lane. Unfortunately, as I say, it's not just my final budget. This will be Finance Secretary Rick Brown's final budget. Rick has been at the heart of this process for the past 47 years, serving governors of both parties and keeping our Commonwealth running in good times and in bad. On behalf of every citizen of the Commonwealth of Virginia, I want to thank Rick Brown for his tremendous service. Rick, we're sorry to see you go, but you have more than earned your retirement. Dorothy and I wish you the best in your next career as a semi-pro fisherman. And we know we wouldn't be here today if it also weren't for the tireless work of Dan Timberlake and his entire team of financial experts. They have been nothing short of extraordinary. I want to thank Dan and the DPD members. I can't count the number of hours that we have spent poring over budgets these last 4 years. It is a grueling process, but one that we have taken on happily and with great pride for the positive impact it can have on Virginia's families. We've certainly had our financial ups and downs in recent years, but I'm proud to announce today that Virginia's comeback story is alive. When I took office in January 14, as you remember, we were facing a revenue shortfall of $438 million, which led to a $2.4 billion cut in the 15-16 biennial budget. Most of the shortfall was caused by federal tax changes and capital gains and non-wage income, but it was also clear that Virginia's economy was struggling as a result of sequestration. We needed to diversify and fast. We needed to build a new Virginia economy that worked for everyone and that could insulate us from the whims of Washington politicians. There is no question that the biggest drag on our economy was created by disastrous federal spending decisions, notably the sequestration cuts which continue today. Those arbitrary cuts reduced military contracts in Virginia by $9.8 billion between 2011 and 2013 and wiped out a significant number of high-paying jobs. Since that difficult budget, my team and I have worked hard to reduce Virginia's reliance on federal spending, which has resulted in both big surpluses and big deficits over the past few years. Through all of these highs and lows of economic gains and losses, I have been committed to two very important goals. First, I pledge to work with you to pass balanced budgets that invest in our key priorities essential to economic growth and opportunity for each and every Virginian. And I'm proud to say today that we have kept that promise over the last 4 years. Together, we have invested a record amount in our education system to build a more talented and skilled workforce. We've increased access to both physical and mental health care, especially for our most vulnerable citizens. We've put our transportation dollars to much better use for taxpayers. And we have acted responsibly to protect Virginia's environment and natural beauty to better maintain clean air and clean water for all of our citizens. The bottom line is that by working together, we have taken significant action to improve the lives of Virginians and regain solid financial footing. The second commitment I made was to build a new, diversified economy so that we can get in front of the challenges that we're facing in Virginia. The new economy would focus on growing industries that are less reliant on federal decision-making, such as in building cybersecurity, bioscience, data analytics, communications, and unmanned systems. Moreover, we would view the entire world as our marketplace. With more than 95% of the world's customers located outside the United States, competing beyond our border is now an economic imperative. I'm proud that I've kept these promises. For 4 years, I have worked tirelessly to promote our existing businesses, attract new investment, and increase trade. I have made thousands of economic development calls on prospective clients and undertaken more economic development trade missions to other nations than any other Virginia governor in history. And the numbers today speak for themselves. To date, our administration has announced more than 1,078 economic projects that will bring in more than $19.4 billion in new capital investments. That's billions more than any administration in Virginia history. What's also exciting is that 2/3 of that investment is still in the permitting stage and will create more opportunity for years to come. In addition, I recently announced the economic impact of our agriculture and forestry industries that has reached now $91 billion annually. That is a 30% increase from when I took office. We've also overseen the creation of 207,000 new jobs. I remind you as well that unemployment is down to 3.6 from 5.4 when I took office and marks the lowest rate we've seen in nearly a decade. Every single city and every single county in Virginia has seen a drop in their unemployment rate, and our initial unemployment insurance claims have just reached a 44-year low. However, there's still much more work to do, but there is no question that by working together, we are leaving Virginia's economy much better off than when we started. We can continue to build on this progress by finding common ground on the issues that we all care about and that directly impact our economic future. That means investing further in education, workforce training, infrastructure, and healthcare. It means using our limited resources wisely to secure the things that we'll continue to need in the future, including a highly skilled workforce and a high quality of life. In this balanced budget, I'm giving you a roadmap to take our achievements to the next level. And because we've gained ground economically, I am optimistic that we now have the resources to do so. When I last spoke with you in August, I announced a surplus in our general fund collections and told you that Virginia economy had continued to expand, especially among higher paying jobs. At that time, I also gave a very stern warning about the budget that I initially expected to unveil today. However, I am happy to report that our outlook in this budget are far more positive than we were just thinking about just a few months ago. For fiscal year 2017, general fund collections exceeded the official forecast by more than $134 million. That was 0.7% within our forecast, which was the smallest error in 10 years. After we factor in transfers to the general fund from other sources, we ended the fiscal year with an additional $2.5 million, bringing the total to $137 million above our budget assumptions from the general fund. That was driven by strong growth in payroll withholding and corporate income tax collections. Now, before you start planning that rooftop swimming pool on the new General Assembly building, we must remember that the entire surplus is already committed. As I explained in August, it will go toward the Water Quality Improvement Fund and our cash reserve, in addition to offsetting debt for our capital projects. The Appropriation Act also called for an additional deposit of $35 million from the general fund in fiscal year 18. Roughly $31 million of this appropriation was expected from the Virginia Tax Amnesty Program. That estimated revenues for the program fell short of expectations. During budget deliberations, unfortunately, the General Assembly revised the estimate of general fund revenue from the program from $31 million to $89 million. However, only $42 million is estimated to be collected, creating a hole of $47 million. That leaves no additional money for the reserve. As a result, the current amount required to be deposited in the reserve is $60.4 million. But given the significant uncertainty that we still expect at the federal level, I believe it's wise to put every available dime we have into our rainy day fund. Let us not forget why we created this cash reserve in the first place. Earlier this year, S&P Global Ratings affirmed our AAA bond rating, but they changed our rating outlook from stable to negative. They did it for two reasons. First, they believe that Virginia could face economic headwinds in the future due to continued uncertainty in Washington. Second, and in light of the first issue, S&P is concerned about the budgeted withdrawals from the Revenue Stabilization Fund during the current biennium. To address these concerns, we must build reserves to protect us against the risks associated with the federal government and national economic uncertainty. And even though we are taking a conservative approach that will help insulate us from potential future shocks in the economy, we are still delivering a structurally balanced spending plan that invests new money in all of our key priorities. As you know, my team began the process of reforecasting general fund revenues shortly after the close of fiscal year 17, which involved a review from our two advisory boards. The forecast calls for our nation's GDP to continue to grow at an average of 2.3% over the next 3 fiscal year period with no recession. Both employment and personal income are forecast to continue to grow at moderate rates through fiscal year 2020. In addition, inflation is expected to remain at or below 2.5% after posting a 1.9% increase in fiscal year 2017. The impact of federal tax reform is still largely unknown and will remain so until the bill, if enacted at all. At the state level, personal income is forecast to grow by 3.3% in fiscal year 18, up from 2.4% the year before, and job growth is expected to increase at a similar rate this year as well. That means more Virginians will secure good-paying jobs and will in turn help us to make the investments we need to provide for quality education, affordable health care, and workforce training for the 21st century jobs. All of these projections give us a reason to be very optimistic today. But due to ongoing national economic uncertainty, we are still using a conservative revenue forecast. For example, we have continued to place a collar on the projections of non-withholding income tax receipts. This acts as a hedge against the natural volatility of these non-withholding receipts. In fact, our revenue surplus in fiscal year 17 would have been a shortfall had the collar not been in place. In total, the final general fund forecast for the next biennium is just over $42 billion. This is based on total general fund resources growing at a 3.8% for fiscal year 19 and 3.9% for fiscal year 20. Given this forecast, today I'm proposing a total of $156 billion from the general fund to be deposited into the reserve in fiscal year 18. Another $50 million in fiscal year 19 and $221 million in fiscal year 20 will be deposited to the reserve, well above my stated goal of $121 million in August. Over the 3-year period, my recommendations will grow the cash reserve to $427 million, or a full 2% of the total of my general fund operating appropriations in fiscal year 20. I can tell you this will be very welcome news to our rating agencies. With the new resources provided by our revised forecast, many of my spending recommendations will fund vital services like the standards of quality for public education and the existing Medicaid program. These are two of the top priorities in my budget. Our public schools are among the best in the nation, and they serve as a foundation for our future workforce and economic vitality. My team and I have worked very hard to transform how we educate our children and prepare them for the new Virginia economy. We've secured historic funding for public education, redesigned the high school experience, and helped expand access and affordability for higher education. But we do still face some headwinds. One of the toughest obstacles to providing that quality education is our ability to attract and to retain our teachers, particularly at our most at-risk schools. I announced last week that my budget funds several initiatives to address that growing crisis. These proposals include funding to automate the teacher license application system and to support principal recruitment and retention in our hardest hit school divisions. In addition to addressing that urgent problem, my budget fully funds re-benchmarking of the standards of quality, which equates to $436 million over the biennium. We are also providing an additional $7 million to support programming for our at-risk students and $7.6 million to provide state support for a full-time principal for the first time in each and every elementary school in Virginia. I've also included $1 million in new funding for 2-week cybersecurity camps dedicated to exposing our high school students to careers in this rapidly growing industry. In total, this budget provides more than $500 million, $516 million in additional funds for public education. I'm proud of the work that we've done to expand opportunity in the classroom, but we also know that our kids can't be hungry to learn if they're just plain hungry. On that point, I want to recognize the First Lady for her work to connect our students to nutritional needs. Thanks to her leadership and the many partners that she has brought in from all over the country to help, we have now served more than 10 million more school breakfasts this year than when we had our first year in office, bringing back an additional $22 million in federal funding to help each and every child in our schools. But we're not stopping there. That's why I've included $2 million over the biennium to support our breakfast initiative funding, incentive funding, which has dramatically improved participation in our high-need elementary schools. It is time that we extend that funding for our middle and high schools as well, so that we can once and for all end childhood hunger here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I've also included more than $7 million for the Virginia Grocery Investment Fund, which will bring much needed capital to our food deserts to expand food access and spark economic development in some of our harder hit areas. Higher education is also critical to maintaining and strengthening workforce of the future. We've leaned in to provide new opportunities for Virginians to access a four-year education, but also for those who want to earn high-demand workforce credentials in less time and for less money. To help keep higher education affordable and accessible for all students, I am proposing an additional $48 million in financial aid. To support institutions with the least resources and those with the greatest growth, I have provided an additional $35 million. Through this funding, schools will be under less pressure to raise future tuition and fees, protecting the pocketbooks of our students and their families. To help keep equipment at the institutions of higher ed up to date, $166 million in debt for the biennium is included for the Higher Education Equipment Trust Fund. I'm also increasing funding for the new Economy Workforce Credential Tuition Assistance Program by $4 million to address the high demand of students wishing to participate in this program. During fiscal year 17, the program served 5,050 students, with over 90% completing the academic portion of the program. And it has nearly tripled the number of people who have earned credentials at Virginia's community colleges and higher education centers. Those are the graduates who are going to fill the high-skilled jobs that we're creating in the 21st century industries. By supporting that successful new program, we're putting more Virginians to work in good jobs with little to no student debt. It's a small investment from the Commonwealth with a big payoff for our Virginia workers. Finally, higher ed will also receive $217 million in maintenance reserve funding to help maintain existing institutional facilities and to help address a variety of infrastructure and security-related needs. This is the largest amount of maintenance reserve funding ever provided to our higher education system. Once our students graduate, whether it's at a 4-year degree, 2-year degree, or a 10-week credential, we want them to find a good job right here in the Commonwealth. That's why we are continuing to invest in initiatives that will boost our efforts to grow and diversify our economy. I am proposing $7.5 million to launch a customized, turnkey workforce recruitment and training incentive program to secure high-impact, high-quality economic development projects. This will be modeled after other nationally recognized workforce programs that have worked successfully in other states. Through this initiative, workforce experts at the Virginia Economic Development Partnership and the Virginia Community College System will collaborate to improve recruitment, screening, delivery, development of customized training, all at no cost to participating companies. This new incentive will be available exclusively to projects that include a new location or a substantial expansion of an existing program or create new high-wage jobs. But by doing so, we will extend the reach of these dollars to provide opportunities in communities that really need it the most. My budget will also provide $4 million for the grant program that incentivizes companies to locate new maritime-related employment centers or expand existing centers statewide in order to encourage the growth of our great Port of Virginia. In addition, my budget will help the Port of Virginia plan for the deepening of the Norfolk Harbor and the Elizabeth River channels. This planning is necessary to gain access to federal funds to dredge these channels. With deeper channels, the Port of Virginia will be able to accommodate the largest container ships and maintain its competitive edge against other ports on the East Coast. As you know, the port was unwisely put up for sale in 2012 after experiencing 5 straight years of losses. Following a $600 million state investment, I'm proud to say it's one of the busiest container ports on the East Coast now and has made money for the past 3 years and is well positioned for future growth. This port is just one of the success stories that we've had during the transformation of our Commonwealth's transportation system. I hope that soon and someday we can tell the same story about WMATA. The metro system is a lifeline for Northern Virginia's economy, and it remains absolutely critical to their economic success. Along with VRE, it supports 130,000 jobs and 85,000 families in Northern Virginia. But we all know that the system is just plain broken, and it represents a significant threat to our economy if we don't fix it and fix it quickly. Instead of agreeing to a regional general sales tax, which would disproportionately burden Virginians, I have instead included dedicated ongoing funding to provide Virginia's $150 million share of the $500 million needed to keep the system up and running. This shouldn't be a tough call, given that the General Assembly has previously voted to approve that funding. And of course, our funding is contingent on D.C. and Maryland paying their fair share as well. Without that funding, Metro's general manager has said that he will need to cut service as of July 1st of next year. And I've said time and time again, if you cut service, it will be a death spiral for the Metro system. People will not ride on the system if it's just plain not reliable. Its problems didn't happen overnight, and its solutions will take time and work. But we cannot delay action any longer. That is why I support the temporary reform board recommended by former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, who did an objective top-to-bottom review of Metro this year. With a more streamlined guidance structure, it will be able to make the tough decisions needed to get this vital system back on track. In addition to Northern Virginia, we need to support mass transit all across the Commonwealth. These systems help reduce the need for road construction, cut the number of vehicles on the roads, and provide more options to commuters and visitors. The state funding that we've been using to support the capital needs of our transit system will no longer be available come fiscal year 2020. Given this reality, my budget includes the authorization to issue $110 million in Commonwealth Transportation Capital Projects revenue bonds for mass transit projects in fiscal year 20 to maintain our state's commitment to these very important services. We need robust, sustainable public transit systems to support growth and diversification of our economy. They also help us reduce our carbon footprint and car culture, which drive other costly investments that we continually make, which is everything from road maintenance to climate change mitigation. As we shift toward a 21st century model for economic growth and transportation, we must remain laser focused on developing a renewables industry that can support our rising energy needs here in Virginia. Solar energy, in particular, is an essential part of our efforts on the energy mix. To that end, my budget includes $2 billion to support the development of the solar industry here in Virginia through a revolving loan program and loan loss program, reserve program. Financing for solar projects will become more accessible. These initiatives build on important investments in the solar industry. As you all know, when I came into office, it is fair to say that Virginia was not exactly on the upward curve of solar. We had only 17 megawatts of solar in Virginia in 2014, one of the lowest in the country. I'm proud to say that today we have over 2,600 megawatts installed or under development today. This isn't just good for the environment. It sends a message to job creators too. These kinds of investments in clean energy have helped us attract the big name companies like Facebook, Google, and Amazon. These actions clear the way for us to attract new businesses and create high-paying jobs. But as I've heard from job creators around the globe, they want to go where they are going to have access to a healthy workforce as well. If we're going to continue to bring in these companies, we will need to strengthen our healthcare system and expand access to it. Sadly, there are still nearly 400,000 Virginians who lack access to basic health care because, as you know, they fall into the coverage gap. Each year during my term, I have gone out to the Ram Clinic in Southwest Virginia, and I have met many of these folks. That once-a-year clinic provides life-saving care, but in America, our citizens should be able to access our health care wherever and wherever they need it, without facing the prospect of financial ruin, which has happened to so many of our families. I have fought to expand to these Virginians the coverage every year for the last 4 straight years. As you know, that effort has repeatedly failed in the General Assembly, leaving hundreds of thousands of our friends and our neighbors without access to basic health care. We have filled that gap with state dollars, the best we could through my governor's access program and other measures to meet these needs, but we can and should be doing much more. That is why my budget will expand Medicaid for the Commonwealth of Virginia as we go forward. Since the Affordable Care Act became the law of the land, Virginia has left more than $10.5 billion of our own tax dollars on the table rather than bringing it back to Virginia to benefit those who need it most. $10.5 billion. Through Medicaid expansion, we will be able to offer coverage to the nearly 400,000 Virginians who not only desperately need it, but they are entitled to it because we have already paid for it. The cost of providing these additional services will be funded through an assessment on the private acute care hospitals. In return, the hospitals will see reduced costs for indigent and uncompensated care, since more of their patients will now, of course, be covered. It makes sense that they will be expected to help cover a portion of the state's cost to serve a population that will now be the source of significant revenue for the hospitals. The expansion of Medicaid will allow Virginia to achieve substantial savings because the new federal funding will replace state-supported indigent care costs, services provided by our 40 community service boards, and inpatient hospital costs for incarcerated individuals. From a budgetary perspective, across the executive branch, there is a modest general fund cost of $612,000 in fiscal year 2018, which will result in a savings of $421.7 million over the upcoming biennium. In addition, this will unlock over $3.2 billion in federal funds over the biennium, which will then run through our Virginia economy. It's long past time to take this common sense, fiscally responsible step. Without bringing these dollars back to Virginia, it makes it impossible to fund all of our shared priorities like the SOQs and our cash reserves. Unfortunately, while our Medicaid expansion proposals have languished, we've continued to see growing costs in physical and mental care. The budget fully funds our mandated services, including the revised Medicaid forecast, foster care, and our adoption programs, and the Children's Services Act caseloads. In total, the increased cost for these services is $743 million over the biennium. Consistent with the 2012 agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice, this budget includes funding to support 825 additional Medicaid waiver slots over the course of the biennium for individuals with intellectual disabilities, including 70 slots set aside to transition people back to their communities. We have budgeted $14.5 million in fiscal year 19 and $30.5 million in fiscal year 20 for these slots. And an additional 50 emergency slots are also funded to provide flexibility during a crisis. The Children's Insurance Program, known as FAMOUS and MCHIP, will soon run out of funds due to federal inaction. Last week, that forced me to notify 68,495 Virginia children and 1,114 pregnant women who stand to lose their coverage if Congress fails to reauthorize the CHIP funding. Just imagine, 2 weeks before the Christmas holidays, thousands of low-income Virginians are getting a notice in the mail that their children's health care is at risk. To me, this is absolutely unconscionable, and it's nothing short of malpractice by the United States Congress. However, given the immense pressure Congress is under to act and its history of doing so only under the threat of a deadline, our projections assume that it will be reauthorized before Virginia runs out of its portion of federal funding, which will occur on January 31st. That includes $49 million from the general fund and $91 million in non-general funds over the 3-year period. The budget also provides $38 million in general fund dollars and nearly $4 million in non-general fund dollars over the biennium to cover increased medical costs for inmates and $5 million in fiscal year 18. We also recognize that there is significant work to be done to address the crises related to mental health and opiates, despite great advancements that we have made in the past 4 years. As such, my budget builds on our recent achievements by expanding same-day access to all 40 of our community service boards. As I heard from the leadership at the Giles County Clinic last week, that option can be a lifesaver for someone who has finally worked up the courage to seek help. If they are told to come back another day, unfortunately, we know that there may not be another day. We also provide funding for 2 assisted living facilities and for supportive housing for people currently in our mental health hospitals who can function in less restrictive settings. We fund the operating costs for the new expansion of the Western State Hospital, and we provide $11 million in funding to begin primary care screening and monitoring at the community service boards in keeping with last year's legislation. Beyond direct treatment, this budget also provides $1 million for the creation and expansion of mental health dockets in jurisdictions with high caseloads. These resources will allow courts to identify individuals with mental illness who can be safely supervised and treated in their community. The budget also provides $2.9 million to establish special units and programs for seriously mental ill inmates. Too often, people with mental health issues wind up in jail, the emergency room, or just plain homeless. These Virginians shouldn't face that dangerous and costly cycle when we have the knowledge and the tools to help them. As we all know, the opiate epidemic has reached crisis proportions in virtually every part of our nation and every corner of our Commonwealth. Additional resources are absolutely necessary if we hope to turn the tide on this issue. My budget increases our resources to combat this problem in several ways. It will provide $10 million to support medication-assisted treatment for individuals who seek help with opiate addiction through our community service boards, nearly $2.5 million for supportive housing for pregnant women and mothers dealing with addiction, and residential opioid treatment programs for non-violent offenders, $1.2 million to increase staffing at the Department of Forensic Science to reduce its opiate-related backlog, and funding to expand our much-needed drug courts. All told, the budget increases our resources to combat the opiate epidemic by $17.8 million from the general fund and $350,000 from the non-general fund sources. Our heart breaks for the 1,100 Virginians who died of an opiate-related overdose last year. It breaks for them and their families. We must take these smart additional steps to save lives today and to get our citizens clean, healthy, and back to work. In addition to Medicaid and behavioral health care, the Commonwealth also operates our Veterans Care Centers and health departments, and we provide funds for private nonprofit organizations to offer rehabilitative and safety net services. My budget includes $45 million from the general fund and $47 million in federal and special funds for these purposes. These funds will ensure adequate training and pay for personnel care attendants, help to implement electronic health records, and to support the construction of our 2 new Veterans Care Centers that I broke ground on this fall. This isn't just the right thing to do for our veterans, but it's a necessity if we're going to remain the best state in the nation for our veterans, military service members, and their families. While I'm proud of all the many priorities we've taken care of in this final budget, this document is only as good as the 110,000 state workers that carry on our vision. That is why I'm so proud to give them one parting gift this holiday season in recognition of their fantastic and dedicated work to our Commonwealth. My budget funds a 2% raise in compensation and offsets health premiums for our hardworking state workforce. This will be the 3rd pay raise for state employees during my term and reflects my commitment to building a strong and sustainable workforce. This pay raise also means that our teachers, law enforcement, state agency workers, and more will not have to choose between serving their communities and sufficiently providing for their families. And we've been able to make this investment while still fully funding the retirement fund and other post-employment benefit programs that we offer. This raise and the many other new investments that we make are only possible because we've all worked together to put our state finances back on solid financial footing. When I took office, I inherited a $2.4 billion shortfall and an economy that was way too reliant on federal spending. Today, I'm proud to leave you with a structurally sound budget that prepares us for the inevitable future storms, meets every single one of our commitments, and builds on the work that we have done together to create a diversified economy and well-educated and healthy workforce. With your partnership, we have built the new Virginia economy. I hope you will use my final budget as a roadmap for continued economic success. It has been a tremendous honor and privilege to serve as your governor. I wish you all the best of luck in the upcoming legislative session, and I wish you the best for a happy holiday season. May God bless all of you in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you, and have a great day. Okay.